For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. This is the time today to celebrate the life and the ministry of Cleo Ernst. You are welcome here in this place where we will listen to and share stories, pray prayers, and sing songs. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join your voices together in our first hymn.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
started back in 1960. The music board in the Wichita University Music Building had a notice that said the Calgary Presbyterian Church was looking for a choir director. I called them and they said if I was interested to show up the next Thursday night when I could try out. That's what I did. I was very nervous leading a group of strangers. I went through a couple anthems with the small choir, and then they thanked me and told me they would call me and let me know what they decided. That evening was the first time I met the organist, Miss Wilson. Several days later, I got that phone call and was told I got the job. Well, one thing led to another. In the summer of 1962, we were married. It didn't happen overnight, but it moved along fast. The following year, I got my first teaching job in Battle Creek, Nebraska, a rural town of 400. Cleo was a big help for me as she had been teaching 4 years already in the Wichita schools in elementary and junior high. Neither of us had ever lived in a small rural town, and we learned a lot. David, our first child, was born in Norfolk, Johnny Carson's home. Probably the same hospital. Within a couple hours, everyone in Battle Creek knew it. Goodness, talk about small towns. A couple times late at night, a few kids were singing, trying to irritate us in a car down the street. Another time, following a football game, we went out to get our car. A VW bus, as they called it, was not there. We quickly discovered a number of high school students had picked it up and moved it. So life in a small town. So why did I love and admire Cleo? Many things I loved and admired about my wife, because I was an introvert. Cleo was just the opposite. I depended on her to help me out with her outgoing personality, visiting with my students and their parents. I looked over and said, "Cleo, have you met Mrs. James?" She then came over and bailed me out. By taking over the conversation, she was a lifesaver. Cleo took after her mom, never short of conversation. I admired Cleo's musicianship. I noticed that immediately after church choir practice, we were a perfect match. Whenever I stopped the choir, she already knew exactly what I was going to say. Yes, indeed, she was a super musician that was a huge help in starting my teaching career. If I had a problem with a school, with a certain class, she would make helpful suggestions with creative ideas. They always worked. It made me look better than I really was. Cleo had a love of children that was obvious from the beginning. Listening was a great part of raising a family. How grateful and thankful I was. That's why I brought a sign for our home that says, "You're the mother that everyone wishes they had." I had great admiration for Cleo dealing with health problems. Later in life, that became very apparent. She tolerated cancer and chemo for nearly 8 years. She had an incident of vertigo where she completely lost hearing in her right ear. As a musician, this potentially can be a devastating issue. Rarely did I ever complain about that. did she ever complain about that. Once I tried putting myself in her shoes by listening to music and covering one ear with my finger. And I did, it brought tears to my eyes to what she was going through. Eventually, she had to give up going to Spokane Symphony concerts because the music just didn't sound right. And jumping quite a bit ahead, Cleo's concerts at her California school were known all over the area, especially her special ones. Some involved artwork that even involved non-music students. She created inspiration to all her students. The kids at school absolutely loved her. They gathered around her like the Pied Piper. At the end of her spring concerts, I heard many kids say, "I can't wait for school to start." The high point before retirement was the recipient of the Teacher of the Year award in the California Music Educators Classroom Music Specialist category. When the school administrators realized she was soon leaving, they convinced her not to retire, Cleo's most important goal was to make children love music, whether performing or listening, so they keep music in their lives forever. That she did. Her cancer later in life began limiting her what she could do. She began taking time to sit near the Spokane River, listening to music or reading a book. She turned to a more serene solitude lifestyle. She enjoyed taking a drive through Riverside State Park. Her most special thing was walking around Muir Pond in Manitou Park on a sunny day, chatting with small children and their parents. Cleo knew something wasn't right the last visit to Sacred Heart. The doctor came to her room and said she was going to be on oxygen for the rest of her life. Her first response was, "When can I go home?" He said, "As soon as you sign some papers." Just after receiving really bad news, her next response, a big good. "I've lived a long, beautiful life," she said. "I have faith." She accepted her future with no fear. I will never forget Cleo's love, kindness, optimistic spirit she shared with others. And every time I check my watch, which I don't have to do, I can see her. Her pictures are both on the watch, but she's always here.
Just in case. My mom, what an amazing person. She fought her cancer for about 7 years, and doctors actually mentioned hospice about 3 years ago. In addition to cancer, she lost her hearing in one ear, suffered from dry eye, and had AFib, just to name a few. Despite all of that, it was very rare to hear her complain. She was always more concerned about others. During this time, and including the last few months, she still regularly donated to multiple charities, helped my daughter Abby with piano, cooked for us, and willingly played games when she was asked, even though she was exhausted. A few months ago, my sisters were coming to Spokane from California for a visit, and she was insisting that we plan some sort of trip that we could take without her. She was concerned that we would be bored sitting around the house visiting. Of course, we explained to her that was the purpose of the visit. We wanted to spend time together with her. She was always very supportive as I was growing up, attending many soccer games, track meets, school concerts, and helping with homework. In the 7th grade, I had a science project that I was behind on, not unusual. It was due that afternoon, and I was not quite finished. I was working on a large poster, something to do with nutrition. My mom volunteered to help me out. I went to school, and she met me between classes later that morning. She handed me a fully finished and colored poster. I was thrilled and relieved, and I believe she got an A on that assignment. One thing I really loved was hearing her tell stories about me when I was very young, too young to remember myself. Like the time we were walking in the neighborhood, I was just a toddler. She saw me pick something up and put it in my mouth. She rushed over and pulled out a live snail from my mouth. Or the time I was at school in the 1st grade, and I had problems removing my sweatshirt because the zipper got stuck. So the teacher pulled me in front of the class and pulled it up over my head. The entire class was laughing. This was very traumatic for me. My mom soon found out that the teacher thought I was being ridiculous for being embarrassed, and my mom was a little angry. She went down to the school to give the teacher a piece of her mind and let her know that she needed to be more empathetic and understanding, just like mom, to stick up for her child. I have fond memories listening to my mom play the postlude on the organ at church every Sunday. Me and my 2 sisters would go up and stand next to the organ as she played. It still amazes me. 2 keyboards, quickly changing the stops and working the foot pedals. It's not an easy instrument. She always said she wished that she would have taught me to play the organ. Our family was very fortunate in the fact that we traveled just about every summer. Long trips driving to the Midwest to spend time with relatives. Those trips usually involved sightseeing and camping. We would stay up late playing games, especially cards. Hearts and Oh Hell were the favorites. We developed a tradition of playing a final hand with 1 card dealt to everyone. We could not look at our own card. We would place the card on our foreheads so everyone else could see it. Then we would place our bids. This always made us laugh. This is not really a mom story, but a family story, and mom is a huge part of that. I remember a time in high school talking with my mom, and I asked her if she thought I was handsome. Side note, I was not. You probably saw the slides. Big frizzy hair, scraggly beard. Of course, she said that I was. She was not being nice, though. She was actually being sincere. My mom always saw the best in me, and that made me feel good. In the 1980s, our family had a Christmas tradition that we would visit Yosemite National Park for a few days. I have many memories of us hanging out at the lodge and watching football. This was playoff time, and it seemed that every year the 49ers were in the postseason. My mom was actually a pretty good sports fan. She would get very excited, screaming and jumping up and down. She was very joyous when her team won, but never bitter when they lost, something that I need to work on. She would also be happy when the Mariners would win, not because she's a Mariners fan, but she knew it made me happy. I have 3 amazing children, Nicholas, Angelica, and Abigail. They are all smart, talented, kind, and successful in their individual pursuits. I believe a big part of the credit for that goes to my mom, as she was very close to all 3 of them. Nick and Jelly are technically step-grandchildren, but she told me the term step-grandchildren never even entered her mind. She loved spending time with them. My mom and dad even brought them to California for a week to show them off to friends and relatives. There is a story that my mom loved to tell. When Nick, Jelly, my mom and dad were driving back from a concert in Sandpoint, Idaho, they were singing songs and laughing, but mom was getting tired, so she taught them the quiet game. Everyone would have to be absolutely quiet for as long as possible. Whoever spoke first would lose. The car stayed quiet for quite a while, about 45 minutes. When they got back to town to drop them off, my mom said, "Well, we made it." And Nick and Jelly immediately exclaimed, "You lose." I think my mom had forgotten that they were even playing. As I stated earlier, she was always concerned more about others than herself. I remember the last time that we visited the emergency room. The doctor said there was not much more they could do for her, and it was time to think about quality of life versus longevity. We were all a little stunned. She looked at me, Abby, and my dad, and she said, "Don't worry about me. I have had a great life, and I know where I'm going." She had a very strong faith and did not want us to be scared or upset at her passing. I don't know what happens when people die, but if there is a heaven or an afterlife, I can't think of anyone more deserving than my mom. Jackson Browne wrote a song called "For a Dancer." The song expresses thoughts about death, loss, how we learn from others, and how we leave a piece of ourselves with others after we have passed. When my daughter Abby plays the piano, I think of my mom. When I come home from work and Abby is baking, I think of my mom. The last line of the lyric in the song says, "And somewhere between the time you arrive and the time you go may lie the reason you were alive, but you'll never know." Well, I think I do know why she was alive. She was here to be a good mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, daughter, sister, wife, and all the rest. My grandfather died when I was in college, and my dad spoke at his service. I don't remember anything he said, except for the last line. He said, "Thanks for being my dad." So I will end the same way and say, "Thanks for being my mom."
Sorry. Friends and family, today we gather here.
Friends and family, today we gather here to celebrate the life of an extraordinary woman, Abby's grandma, Cleo Ernst. She was more than just a grandma, great-grandma, mom, aunt, daughter, and cousin. She was the radiant heart and soul of the Ernst family, a source of inspiration to all who had the privilege of knowing her. As we reflect on her life, we remember not only the tears we shed today, but also the countless smiles and warmth of her love that will forever be with us.
Her values consisted of love, family, kindness, acceptance, faith, honesty, compassion, and so many more. These values are what shaped the woman she became. I think we can all agree she was such an amazing woman. She could light up a room with her smile, laughter, or jokes. She was one of my biggest supporters in life, and I will always be thankful to have had someone like her there through all my ups and downs as I grew up. As I think back on all the times I've spent with her, I would like to share a few of my favorite memories. I recall the time she had initially lost her hearing, which led to some rather unusual conversations. During these moments, I witnessed her laughter shine the brightest. She couldn't grasp what I was saying, and at times I struggled to understand her as well. Yet we both found ourselves sharing in laughter over our amusing exchanges, which remained a secret between us that nobody else could understand. My grandparents shared a profound passion for music. The majority of their children pursued musical paths, becoming very skilled musicians themselves. She would tell me stories of her attempts to teach my siblings piano, but it never seemed to end the way she would have liked. However, when I came along, she made the decision to help me embark on a musical journey. She took it upon herself to find an amazing piano teacher, who I grew quite close with as time progressed. During this time, my love for music began to blossom, and since then, it has only grown. I remember the time when we would play games like Uno, Skip-Bo, Sorry, and more. My job as the rule enforcer would to make sure that everyone follows the rules and sticks to them. I was pretty brutal with her, as I would tell her to draw 3 cards when she didn't say Uno, when I would send her back to start and Sorry, or when I'd tell her to place the card down after she flipped it and Skip-Bo. I think playing games was my favorite memory with her. Every Christmas, it was tradition to make homemade sugar cookies. The dough had to chill in the fridge for an hour, and I would always be so excited to sneak bits of it because it tasted so good. I usually got caught, and Grandma would tell me it's bad for me and I'll get sick. But I never did, and of course I didn't listen. We would cut them into little shapes like snowman, snowflakes, bells, mistletoe, and more. We made homemade frosting for them too, and we would color them. Then there were the times we would go out for coffee once a week and catch up on life. I'd tell her about my friends, my cat, how school was, how work was, and my mental health. She was someone I could count on and someone I felt comfortable sharing my feelings with. She would tell me about the car rides she went on or when she walked at Manitou Park and phone calls she had with her closest friends. She told me about a song, Trying to Be Like Jesus. She had said she listened to the song every day, and it reminded her to try and do better. With this, it has encouraged me to do better, especially for her. My grandma had spoken about how she had no regrets in life, and she was content with the life she had lived. She shared a few pieces of wisdom with me, so I invite each and every one of you to incorporate this wisdom into your lives as well. First and foremost, she advised, at the end of each day, before you close your eyes, be content with what you have done, be grateful for what you have, and be proud of who you are. Additionally, she said, believe in yourself. Anything is possible. Never give up. Practice makes progress. Be grateful, appreciate what you have, work hard, make every job count, be kind, treat others with respect, stay strong, overcome life's ups and downs, keep smiling, and think positively. Lastly, she left me with a strong message. You are deserving of a wonderful life, and so I share this same message with all of you. I want you to know, without a shadow of doubt, that each and every one of you is deserving of a wonderful life. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. We're Cleo's daughters. I'm Gina.
I'm Shonda. And like many of our family, neither of us are public speakers. So we decided to stand up here together just for a little moral support.
I thought I'd talk about little things I will miss about her and also things that made her special and that I will always remember about her.
And as I tried to think of those special moments that were only between me and my mom and that we shared together, I realized most of my memories of my mom were special moments where involved my whole family. And that's one of the things that made her so special.
So I'll start with a few things that I'll miss, little things. I will miss stooping down to give her a hug. Of course, the older she got, the more I had to stoop, but she still always gave great hugs. I will miss sharing coffee with her. She was never a coffee drinker growing up and didn't care for coffee at all until she discovered what I call fancy coffees, the only ones I drink as well. Coffee with sweet flavorings that disguise the actual taste of coffee. She enjoyed trying out new little coffee shops, so I'll miss ordering her favorite one-shot vanilla latte.
I'll remember that she was very fashionable. She was a great dresser, and even at 85, she received compliments all the time. We will both miss shopping with her. That's something we always loved doing. No trip would ever be complete without spent browsing through the cute little shops along the way. One of our favorite things to do was go to the arts and crafts festivals. We could easily spend all day or more wandering around a craft show, even though our brother didn't.
We will miss spending Christmas with her. Mom loved Christmas. The house was decorated into practically every corner. As time went on, she accumulated quite the Christmas collection. She was quite well known amongst her friends for this, sometimes people coming by just to peek in and see her decorations. Walking into my parents' house at the holidays, you felt instant Christmas spirit. She had an amazing collection of little houses and accessories for her Christmas village, some of which have now become part of my collection. Mine could never measure up to hers, though. She also used to put together elaborate, at least by our standards, Christmas dinners for her close friends at Christmas time. We were just talking about that a few months ago when we came across a copy of the menu for one of those dinners. She mentioned how she doesn't know how she ever pulled that off by herself, but she always seemed to have endless energy when planning parties or get-togethers like that.
Her friends were very important to her. She often talked about her friends and how much they meant to her. She kept in touch with her friends and often their children as well, all over the country.
Some of this stuff might sound familiar. I'll always remember her love of sports. She said that love started with our granddad, who was a sports fan. Growing up, all three of us kids played soccer at one time or another. She was always the parent running up and down the sidelines, cheering, saying, "Go, go, go!" And I recall 49er watch parties with her friends during playoffs or Super Bowl games, where she was the one rooting the loudest at a great play or touchdown.
Those that knew my mom well know that family was everything to her. She would often tell us how lucky she was to have such a wonderful family. Even though my mom lived far from her own parents and siblings, she visited them every year, but we did it as a family. My mom and dad were both music teachers, so we were fortunate to have the summers off. Almost every year since I can remember, our family drove from California to Kansas in our checker cab, which there was a picture in the video, to visit my mom's family. We camped along the way in a pop-up trailer. I think most kids, even adults, would dread having to spend their entire summer vacation every year with their parents driving to the Midwest. Well, these were some of my fondest memories with my mom. How many moms could drive thousands of miles in a car with their 3 young kids and not go insane? Like many siblings, we didn't get along every minute. One of my memories from our road trips were the many times my dad would have to pull the car over and my parents would have to make my older brother sit up in the front because he would not stop teasing me and my sister. Once he got moved to the front, he would pull down the visor mirror. He would continue to stare and make faces at us, causing me and my sister to continue and whine and complain. My mom's favorite saying was, if you would just ignore him, he would just stop doing it. I guess we never learned because my brother never stopped and we continued to complain.
I remember listening to a lot of music on those trips. My mom and I shared a lot of the same musical tastes. Some that I particularly remember listening to were Simon and Garfunkel, Broadway tunes, Camelot was really big one year, and John Denver, he was our favorite. We all enjoyed listening to him, especially while driving through the mountains. Whenever I hear John Denver, I think of my mom and those summer trips. As we got older and our parents moved to Spokane, my sister and I still made sure we made it back for each Christmas and our yearly family vacation. For my parents' 50th anniversary, we all went to Hawaii. One day we were signing up to go ziplining. We assumed it would just be us kids and maybe Dad, but imagine our surprise when my mom piped up with, "What about me?" So we all went ziplining, at times over very large canyons. We all enjoyed it thoroughly, and they said at 74, she was one of the oldest women that had ziplined there. Of course, we'll always remember her love of music. She said she believes that love started with her mom, who sang to her on a daily basis from the time she was very young. She was lucky to be able to take class piano lessons once a week in grade school, playing most of the time on a cardboard piano, as there was only one piano for all the students in class. That didn't deter her, though, and by the time she was 15, she was the church pianist and eventually the organist as well. She got her college degree in music education and taught music in the public schools for over 30 years.
She was loved by her students and other teachers alike. She even won a Classroom Music Teacher of the Year award for the state of California. She was always humble, and she doesn't know why she was awarded the award, but anyone who knew her, that she was more than worthy of it.
She was always there to accompany us, any of us, for solos at school, church, or family get-togethers, those dreaded, obligatory, play for the relatives, impromptu recitals. Of course, I'll always picture her behind the organ at church. People were always amazed at how she could reach, let alone maneuver her feet up and down the foot pedals. It still amazes me how she could play 2 levels of keyboard, foot pedals, and read 3 lines of music all at the same time. Playing for church was a pure joy for her, and from the time she started at 15, she never stopped until just a few short years ago. If her hands and eyesight would have allowed it, she would have still been playing up to her last day, I'm sure. Mom was the heart of our family. She was our connection to our extended family. She kept in touch by phone or text with all of her siblings, nieces, nephews, and even some of their kids as well. If there's one thing that was always clear, it was her love for her family. My mom loved her family unconditionally and absolutely adored her grandchildren and was so proud of them all. She was a beautiful, loving mom, grandma, wife, sister, and friend. She was kind, smart, and always supportive. She always had a smile and a positive attitude.
One of the biggest things I discovered about my mom was that she was an incredible fighter. Even after everything she went through after being diagnosed with cancer, her fighting spirit never faltered. She just kept fighting. Mom wasn't scared of dying, at least she never let on. Her faith was strong, and I believe that kept her going. She was more worried about the people she would leave behind than she was about herself. Her only concern seemed to be her family, and especially my dad. She wanted to know we would be okay after she was gone. She was always positive, never complained, and even though she had every reason to. No one would ever have faulted her for that. I don't think I could have been half as strong as my mom.
Thank you all again for being here. You were all a meaningful part of her life. I wish all of her friends and family could have been here today. Of course, if they were, there would be standing room only.
Mom, it's hard to believe you're no longer here, even though you're not physically here. I know you're here in spirit and watching over us and here with us today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cleo's nephew, John. I'm the son of Ed Norman's oldest brother, Richard. And I'll share a few memories from my parents and then share a few of my own. From my father, some grateful memories of Cleo. I sadly missed Norman Cleo's wedding in June of 1962, as I was on a service project in West Germany at that time. The first time I met Cleo was on a cross-country trip in June of 1963. Cleo and Norm picked me up in Kansas City, and we drove to Wichita together, where I spent the night at their home. My first thought after being with Cleo for the first time was, wow, what a lucky guy Norm is, having married this extraordinary woman. In the years that have followed, every time we have been with Norm and Cleo, have confirmed that initial impression. The gifts I came to admire most about Cleo, in addition to her extraordinary skill as an organist and pianist, was her lifelong devotion to Norm, her children, her grandchildren, and her new great-granddaughter. Though Cleo was a professional musician or music educator, her family always came first. During these last 7 years of Cleo's battle with cancer, I've come to cherish two other things about her: her deep faith and her resilient and positive spirit in the face of a disabling and challenging disease. I never heard Cleo complain about her condition. She was always upbeat, positive, hopeful, and full of gratitude for the blessings in her life, especially the support of her family and friends. That is just the kind of person Cleo was. She always attributed the source of her positive and hopeful spirit to her deep Christian faith. In a letter to family and friends in 2016, Cleo wrote, "I have so many people praying. How could I not be doing well? When I think of how many of you have had more serious problems, it is very humbling to think that you take the time to pray for me. We appreciate it so much." She went on to quote one of her favorite hymns, "No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing?" From Barbara, memories of wonderful Cleo. Her warm acceptance of me into the Ernst family, her playing the organ at our wedding, Christmas at Cleo's home in Livermore, and her wonderful decorations. She prepared delicious meals, and her house was always warm and welcoming. Cleo was always patient and kind, and I always felt her love. Music was her gift, and combined with her love of teaching, she touched many lives of kids and adults alike. Cleo's positive attitude will always inspire me, especially in challenging times. I miss Cleo, but her memory will live with me forever. My sister and I, echo all of our parents' memories of Cleo. We felt her kindness, her positive energy, her love. There's something personal, though, I'd like to share. My mother grew up in Pennsylvania, so all of my mother's family is on the East Coast, which meant that all of my holidays as a child were spent with my father's side of the family on the West Coast. And I have really very fond memories of holidays with Norman, Cleo, and David, and Gina and Shonda, most often at their home in Livermore. It isn't that there are specific moments that stand out for me, although I remember, for whatever reason, being very impressed by the stairs to the second story of their home. We didn't have a two-story house at home, so somehow that was really impressive to me. I remember being amazed, too, that for a while at least, my cousins had a rat for a pet. As David said earlier, this has nothing to do with Cleo per se. But as I look back at that time now, what stands out for me is that it is what I associate most strongly with the love of family. Despite all the variations of family that I've experienced since, those times are still the most precious to me. And Cleo was at the center of all of that. I regret that as I grew into adulthood and as our families grew and changed, we didn't spend as many holidays together anymore. I feel a lot of sadness about that now. I did have the good fortune, though, to visit with Norman and Cleo at their home 2 years ago, and with David, too. And it brought back all of those fond memories. The feeling of a home-cooked meal, the feeling of being with family, and most of all, it was being seen again through the eyes of a loving aunt. She was my only aunt on the Ernst side of my family. And having lost my mother when I was young, to feel that sort of motherly presence was deeply impactful for me. We spent dinner last night at their home, and I was struck by all of the sort of life-affirming messages that were framed sort of around the house. One I saw actually on the slideshow. But above the back door, it says, "There is always something to be thankful for." And on the kitchen counter, the one that was shared earlier. You're pretty much my most favorite of all time in the history of forever. And then by the front door, there was a quote from a John Denver song that I learned Gina had framed for her mom. I'm not going to try to sing it because that would sound horrible, but joy was the thing that she was raised on. Love was just a way to live and die. Gold is just a windy Kansas wheat field. Blue is just a Kansas summer sky.
The family wanted to invite you, if you had stories that you'd like to share or memories of your time with Cleo, that you could do that with one another at this time. There's a microphone here if you want to come up. If you want to stay there, then we can get the microphone to you. Does anybody have a story or a memory or a moment they'd like to share with those gathered this afternoon?
Cleo and I would go for coffee, and I can't help it if I'm short. This is the way we'll do it. We would go for coffee, and we both disliked coffee. Mine was chocolate, hers was vanilla. I happened to go to her house. Well, I met her at church, and she is such a great lady, great dresser, wonderful. Anyway, I happened to be in her house during Christmas once. I could not believe it. Oh my gosh. I thought I decorated. She had, there's no place in that house you couldn't look and see decorations. But she had this one house. It's a Thomas Kincaid house. And when you turn it on, it repeats the Night Before Christmas story. Oh my gosh, I thought that was the best thing that ever was. Well, when she was diagnosed with cancer, maybe a year or so afterwards, Norm showed up on my doorstep and he gave me that house. She wanted to have it.
Cleo was and is a very dear friend of mine. The first time I came to Bethany, I only knew Paul and Rose. I walked down the stairs, and this petite little lady, like my mama, walked over to me with this great big smile and sparkling eyes and said, "I'm Cleo. Welcome to Bethany." I, to this day, don't know how or why we clicked, but we did. Soon we were meeting for coffee every other week for an hour, and then it was for an hour and a half, and then it was for 2 hours. Sometime between the 1.5 hours and the 2 hours, we were no longer meeting every other week. It had to be every week. We had so much to talk about. No topic was off limits. Norm, you were so gracious to give us that time together when I know it meant you had to find something to do with your time. Cleo and I shared our upbringing, including the denomination of church, which was different, church teaching, college years, professional life, marriage, and how we ended up here at Bethany. How did a little Presbyterian girl and a little Mennonite girl find their way to Bethany? We both grew in our spiritual lives to believe in the mission of Bethany, that all people are worthy of God's love and therefore our love. To Norm, you were her life and her love. She loved you dearly. To her daughters, son, granddaughter, nephews, and others I don't know, she was so proud of you. You are wrapped in God's love, and I pray that you will find comfort. Cleo, my dear friend, I miss your smile, your bright eyes, and yes, your fashion style. Rest in God's love.
I came back, I warned you. I arrived here in Spokane after a significant amount of time in North Carolina back in 2011 and started work at Opportunity Church. And the 4.5 years I was at Opportunity, Cleo was my organist the whole time. And I could say so much about it, but let me just say that I believe that music ministry requires a team effort between an organist and a director. It's a collegial thing. It's not power and servant. It's two equal people working together to make something incredible and spiritual happen. And I could not have asked for more than what Cleo gave. She was such a great colleague. So thank you.
Peggy and I found Bethany, I don't know, about 9 years ago or 8 years ago. And the first people that I remember greeting us were Norm and Cleo. And just wonderful warmth. But the thing about Cleo and I, we kind of got closer because of music. She would tolerate me asking her to be an accompanist or help me practice for something, and she never complained until, in the end when she couldn't hear out of one ear, that became more difficult, her hands and stuff. I miss her. I don't know about anybody else, but I just miss her. She was one of the most beautiful people I've ever known, and I will always remember her. And we'll be around for Norm, that's for sure. And anyone who knew her, even for a brief time, met one of the most beautiful, wonderful people to ever walk this earth, as far as I'm concerned.
So there's more stories, and there's a time downstairs after the service, too, to be able to share those with Cleo's family. Let's take a moment and pray. O God, before whom all generations rise and pass away, we praise you for all those who have lived this life in faith, who live eternally with you. And especially we thank you for your servant Cleo. Praise you for the gift of her life, for all in her that was good and kind and faithful, for the grace you gave her that kindled in her the love of you and enabled her to serve you faithfully. And we thank you that for her death is past and pain is ended, and that she has now entered the joy that you have prepared through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Friends, the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and of God's Son, Jesus Christ. And the blessing of God Almighty, Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit be with you all this day and forevermore. Amen. The family and the congregation invites you to join them downstairs for a reception. If you go through the narthex and then there's stairs right down there, you'll reach the fellowship hall. Please join us for more stories and sharing, and a celebration continues for Cleo's life.